welcome you to the conversation segment of the Signature Show this afternoon. I'm sure that you've noticed that last Sunday we could not converse with you. A lame excuse is that it was as a circumstance beyond our control. But this Sunday we are in control of all the circumstances. We are progressing our conversation on the leadership of the National Assembly. Why are we interested in it? The fulcrum of every democracy seems to be the National Assembly. Whatever development activities, the health and debate that goes on, the direction of national conversation, they all seem to be determined by the National Assembly. So, this afternoon we are going to converse on the leadership of the 10th National Assembly. And I have with me somebody who is in a position to offer weighty words on it. I have Danjuma Mohammed. Now, Danjuma Mohammed was the chairman of the national movement, he will correct me if I get it wrong, Movement for Democracy and Danjuma can help me. It's a mouthful.
It is quite,
yes.
Movement for the Restoration and Defense of Democracy.
For the restoration and defense of democracy.
MRDD.
Great. The truth of the matter is that there's need to restore our democracy, and there's also a need to defend its tenets. Now, Danjuma, I'm sure you've been reading and watching on television.
I'm following too.
People coming out to say, look, I want to be Speaker of the House of Representatives. I want to be the President of the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I've also heard conversations like, yes, APC has the highest number of senators in that chamber and also has the highest number in the Green chamber. There's also a conversation that no, the small parties have the ultimate highest number, so they're getting together. If it's a game of number, then they have the number and they want to produce against the APC. These are interesting conversations. But democracy is about the people. In your mind, should number be the prime consideration, the most important consideration in looking at who should be Nigeria's Senate President or Speaker?
Yes, number I think should only play, as usual in democracy, the determinant process. But certainly it shouldn't be the end consideration. What should be the end consideration is the overriding national interest. The various conversations and various positions you just said represents different interests. But it's okay, that is democracy for you. You are free to pursue and promote your personal interest, whichever way possible, but certainly not above the overriding national interest. And by this I mean that it is time for the National Assembly to stop being an elite assembly. It is time for it to take its proper position as the parliament of the people, where people's opinion, people's interest are being promoted, above selfish parochial interest, because that is vis-a-vis the national interest. And also, having said so, I want to say that ability, merit, competence should not at any point be sacrificed, on the altar of mediocrity in determining who becomes, the Senate President. We must have a good antecedent. You must have, appreciable accomplishment, within the period you have served before now. Certainly, we do not expect the National Assembly to be headed or to be chaired by a novice, talking about Senate President and the Speakership. So the thing is that as a political party, the APC owe itself a duty to ensure that leaders that to be installed, those to be installed or elected as the Senate President and the Speaker respectively, should be those who have deep in their heart, the passion to work amicably in tandem with national interest, with the executive, by ensuring that their manifesto and the promises made to the people, is well implemented between now and the next 4 years. So that is why there is no responsible political party in the democracy that turns its eyes away from who becomes or who heads or who leads the National Assembly. That is why even in the advanced democracies like the United States, you have midterm elections. So it is structured in such a way that National Assembly or the Congress do not terminate same time with the executive. But in our own case, it's a pity. We've gone through different experience of military interventions here and there, making it a kind of impossible for us to take off at the same time. But having said so, look at the importance, the place of the National Assembly is the only organ of democracy that cannot be separated from democratic rule. The executives will always be there with military, with democracy or no democracy. The judiciary will always be there, democracy or no democracy. But the National Assembly is the only organ or a branch of governance in the democracy
that
suffers, that does not exist without democracy. So, and that is the engine room of democratic practice and system. So, the discussions and the opinions you just talked about, they are okay, they are real. I mean, that is why we have the freedom of expression under democracy. We have that right. And these are one of the things, one of the features that makes democracy different from other formats of government.
Danjuma, let me interject a little bit. The conversation now has included zoning.
Yes.
And if you listen to people on television, in the print, on radio, conversing, they say, look, it should be our turn to produce. For fairness and equity, we should be given. That sounds reasonable, but should it be so central to the point of burying capacity, competence, and merit? Because you say it ought to be a people's parliament catering to the interest of the people. Between this fairness theory, my turn theory, zoning theory, which is good, makes the political parties comfortable, does it also translate to making the people comfortable?
Yes. First and foremost is what is it that will stabilize the polity? Yes, we are a democratic country, but we cannot run on the same template with other democratic countries, neglecting our peculiar differences or our peculiar experiences. The thing there is that zoning is key to Nigeria as a nation, to Nigeria's politics. Zoning is key because for stability. Because without a country, you cannot even have a government. Not to talk of talking about development. Fine. So if we talk about zoning, it is key because the zoning is meant in as much as it is in tandem with national interest. I want to believe, and I believe very strongly, that we have reached a point in time in this country where there is no zone in this country that has no competent people to man the affairs of this nation at whatever level. So, and having said this, that means that zoning should be first considered in a way of ensuring that the strata of our political leadership depicts our national character as enshrined in our constitution. Because you need first to enlist the people's confidence in governance before you govern them. Because if you don't, they will begrudge you. And when they begrudge you, I'm sorry, we've gone through it over and over. I mean, we've had well-intended, even military head of states who could not meet up with their ambition, all because they could not enlist the people's confidence. So in that, zoning is key. That is one. But why zoning? You don't sacrifice merit. You don't sacrifice competence. And you don't sacrifice integrity. These are key. So, and because if you say, yes, let number outrightly determines it, well, let it determine, but you see, you are not doing justice to the polity. Looking at our peculiar experience, you have a lot of minorities in this country. A lot of minorities in this country. It's a whole nation unto itself. The British said Nigeria is made up of 3 major ethnic groups or the nationalities. The truth is that the creation of states after the dissolution of the regions have even shown that we have many major ethnic groups in this country, because there are states, so many states with major tribes. Sure. Exactly. So the truth of the matter is that you have to consider all these interests, and for this, zoning is key. In fact, that was why, personally, when I looked at the issue in the National Assembly, precisely on 4th of May, I led about 23, CSOs from the northern part of Nigeria to call on both the national leadership of the APC and Nigerians, to cede, or rather to shift, to ensure that at least this time around we have, a Nigerian of southern minority extraction, emerging as Nigeria's Senate president. Because I looked at it from my own personal wisdom, that you cannot run democratic system for 23 uninterrupted years, and while a key, component of that democracy, has not been able to be deemed qualified, in as much as they have qualified people to, to rule over, to chair the National Assembly. So that was why I did that, not for anything, because I want national character to be reflected, because it's key to the stability of our national polity. That is it. And also, I want a situation whereby there will be a sense of belonging, not just the issue of majority. We've had Senate presidents in the last 23 years coming from the South, but they've always come from one major ethnic group. So I now said, okay, let us have a paradigm shift for now. And for this, of course, I did, and with my colleague, suggested that Godswill Akpabio should be given the chance to represent Nigeria, not his minority extraction, to represent Nigeria as the chairman of the National Assembly. That is the Senate presidency. That was what I went for. That was even before the president-elect made his opinion known, that is to the public, and even before the party adopted him, because it's just commonsensical that we should allow for inclusivity. If you play a democracy without a democracy of exclusivity, it will not fly in Nigeria. It will not fly in Nigeria, because people will begin, the same Nigerians, and they are key also to the polity and to the entire unity of this country. They will begin to run campaigns against you, all because they feel excluded, and it is not necessary. The nation has so much to lose excluding people from the polity, no matter how few, but has nothing to lose, in fact has more to gain in including all. So that was why I felt on 4th, I went to the national TV, it was on AIT, on different televisions, that Godswill Akpabio, coming from that minority extraction, should be given the opportunity to run.
Now, let me look at how the National Assembly and the leadership of the National Assembly affects the health of the nation. One is in setting the legislative agenda, which should translate to development agenda. Yes. 2 is in influencing the moral fiber of the nation. 3 is, of course, in stabilizing democracy. I was going to ask you before, so I didn't want to mention names in this conversation, but do you think that the antecedents of any contender to the National Assembly leadership should count? Should their antecedents, not forgetting the function of determining the moral character of the nation and its health, 2, determining the development agenda, 3, creating stability. Should the contenders' antecedents, what they did before, what they said before, how they acted before, should it count in their choice?
Exactly. That was what I meant by we must not sacrifice in doing this. We must not sacrifice, merit, competence, and integrity on the platform of mediocrity. The truth of the matter is that their antecedents and their accomplishment must matter, because you cannot come as a novice and head an assembly like this. It's such an august assembly that is very central, to the life, to the political and economic life of this nation. Because we are talking about the passage of national budgets. You must have that fecundity to know that, look, ABC ought to be there or not. You must be able to preempt what the national budget should look like. And you as a leader, because as the Senate President or Speaker of House of Reps, you are first among equal. So your colleagues will look towards your side. And also you must have the integrity, that such that when you present, they know that you are presenting what came as it came from the executive, not excluding anything. And when you are taking to the executive, you are not removing anything in the hidden. You must have that credibility. So the truth is that there must be credibility on the part of the fellow.
In all the contenders.
In all the contenders, if you don't have antecedent of very good experience, particularly at this very critical point in time, because we have reached a point in this country where we do not necessarily have to go into unnecessary opposition, just to kind of
for the fun of it.
For the fun of it, or for ego reasons. It shouldn't be. At this point, the survival of the nation is key. Every aspect of this nation is bleeding, in dire need of development, in dire need of peace, and of course, in dire need of equity, in terms of development, program sharing and all that.
What the last word you used, I must interject if you don't mind. Please. Can we set an agenda for the National Assembly? An agenda, as you said, that must be designed looking at the interests and needs of the people. What should be a very critical national agenda for the leadership of the 10th National Assembly?
Very good. Number one is for the nation to have peace. That is number one. The National Assembly, the agenda number one is to ensure that all this criminality that has engulfed this nation, we must recognize the fact that it has a kind of hampered our way to progress. It has denied us a lot of development, and there is no nation that will develop without peace. Number one is for the National Assembly to do everything possible to make sure that Nigeria becomes peaceful. That is number one. Number two, the Nigerians are really hungry. Exactly, Nigerians are hungry. National Assembly, well, they are representatives of the people, and they are the true representatives of the people. So the National Assembly, number two, must ensure that the nation becomes, self-sufficient in terms of particularly feeding. The cost of living in Nigeria is unnecessarily too high. It cannot continue this way. In fact, democracy will crash. Yes, because we've even gotten to a point whereby the economy itself is beginning to be overburdened by the expenses of democratic institutions, which shouldn't be in the first place. So here you need job creation and every aspect of wealth creation that will bring about, sustainable development and a kind of, affordable, living for Nigerians. So from there, we can now move on to a more advanced agenda. But these two are key, they are important. Health must come in. That is in ensuring that...
I want to come in again.
Very good.
You are a politician. One of the challenges that many commentators have said about Nigeria is its very skewed reward structure. And what they mean by that is simple. The politician seems to be over-rewarded for politicking against the real Nigerian worker who labors. That is one. Two, the level of opulence and consumption of Nigerian political class creates pressure. One, on crime control. Two, on the economy itself. Crime control. The politician enters into office by all means, including impunity, including criminality. And when the ordinary Nigerian sees that impunity and criminality pay, he begins to aspire to it. Therefore, the young boy in the street, seeing the politician carrying ballot boxes, being a thug, succeeding, and he is part of our conversation this afternoon of how he's going to be either the Speaker or the Senate President or Chairman of Committee or whatever it is, but in an exalted position. That young boy says, impunity pays. And he begins to aspire to impunity. Or he says, criminality pays. And he begins. So, what do you think we can be saying to our politicians this afternoon in setting the agenda? Do you think the National Assembly, which is part of our political elite, can look itself in the eyes and say, we have been wrong, we can change matters?
Certainly, that is where the new leadership of National Assembly should take off from. You must take off from a position whereby you know that you have not done well. The National Assembly has not been able to impact positively on the people. Exactly. So the next Senate President and the next Speaker of the House of Representatives must first take off from that level of the fact that the National Assembly is not in the good books of Nigerians. The truth of the matter is that you start by making yourself as an example. There is need for the National Assembly itself to discourage ostentatious living by legislating laws that will prune expenditures, its own expenditure, in favor of the people. Because it is not, you don't prune your own and nothing happens to the people. It's not done that way. If National Assembly is reducing its own internal or internal expenditure by say 1 trillion naira, that 1 trillion naira should be seen as money saved and taken down to boost areas of insufficiency where the people are, for the people. Because the people matters most. That's why I said it must be the people's parliament, so that this impression will begin to change. The reason why you have this aspiration, you said it, it is not a lie that people see politicians have been over-rewarded. Exactly, because people see the jumbo pay and the ostentatious living. It's the jumbo pay that encourages this. Exactly. So, and when this happens, I'm afraid people will not even want to Nigerians will not be encouraged to embark on ventures that are productive. They would rather see politics
that's a shortcut.
as a shortcut. And in wanting to do that, like you said, they will cut corners at all costs. Violence will come in, cheating will come in. And what do you expect if such a person makes it to the National Assembly? I mean, as a senator, where you have a senator who cheated all through,
it becomes a role model.
Exactly. I mean, then it's unfortunate. You have.
But Danjuma,
Yes,
you know what
please.
you are doing? Are you not recommending rank suicide?
No, certainly. I'm not recommending ranks. I'm only recommending political sacrifice. There is this demand in patriotism. Patriotism demands that whenever the interest of the nation is at stake or comes in conflict with personal interest, national interest should take precedence. At the point we are in now, national interest is in conflict with personal interest. This is the truth. And that is why national interest should take precedence above personal interest. All it calls for is sacrifice. It doesn't take anything from you as a legislator, to reduce. It is not even on the part of the individual legislator. All you need to do is look at the entire National Assembly. And it will not stop there. They will do the same to the executive. They will do the same to the judiciary. And they will ensure, they have oversight functions to ensure that whatever sacrifice, they embark upon trickles down to the people. That's the most important thing. On the newspapers some days before now, thank God, I'm glad they called off or suspend their strike. Medical doctors, were threatening to go on strike. I mean, it's uncalled for when most of our brains, medical brains, have gone abroad and they are still encouraged because they are needed abroad and they are well paid over there. And those who remain here are still threatening to go on strike, all because there isn't sufficiency in salary payment, there isn't sufficiency in equipment and all that. It shouldn't be. So if in sacrificing by pruning the cost of governance at the level of these three arms of government, money can be deployed to that area to kind of provide the necessity for the people. It's not for the medical doctors. They are not fighting for themselves. It's for the people. How many Nigerians can go to India? No, how many Nigerians can embark on medical tourism? Very, very few. In fact, I want to believe that less than 1% have that capacity to do that, particularly now that you have our Naira, unfortunately, suffering under the dollars. So what I'm trying to say here is that it calls for sacrifice. So the next National Assembly leaders, the Senate President and the Speaker should first take off from that very neutral admittance of the fact that the National Assembly isn't in the good book of Nigerians. And democracy itself, executive cannot succeed in a democratic system without the National Assembly. Ditto the judiciary. So now it is time, like you said, for a kind of a kind of assessment and sacrifice in the interest of the nation.
Danjuma, I must thank you for coming to the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm grateful.
Well, in the past 30 minutes or thereabout, I've been conversing with Danjuma Mohammed, the former chairman. That name is still a mouthful.
MRDD.
Movement for Renewal and Restoration and Defense of Democracy. Honestly, that name is very important because our democracy needs to be renewed and it must be defended. We've been talking about the legislature, its leadership, its role in creating a Nigeria that is people-centered. Who should wear the cap? Who does the cap fit? His opinion? Somebody who has the interest of the people at heart. Numbers may count. Competence should count more. People-centered leadership should be the prime conversation and consideration. Let's thank Danjuma for coming to our conversation this Sunday. Not to forget that this conversation never ends and my name never changes. I'm Wabuze Njoko. Good afternoon.